بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا مولانا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك وعلمنا من لدنك علما ينفعنا في الدين والدنيا والكريم. اللهم لا تحرمنا خير ما عندك بشر ما عندنا. صلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الحمد لله. We continue our class in Hajar, in suspension or restriction in fiqh. And we spoke about, and we said there's around 30 different types of restriction in fiqh, and they are mentioned in larger books of fiqh. And we mentioned the most important one in our last class, and that was the suspension that happens to someone who is considered Safi, someone who isn't able to act on behalf of their own money because they're not mature, their age hasn't reached the right age, any of those reasons that we mentioned. They're foolish, they spend money in haram, and we mentioned the details of that and the different types of safih that exist. After that, the second most important kind of hajar or suspension is what is known as al-hajar ala al-muflis. So hajar or suspension that is declared upon someone who is bankrupt. Someone who is muflis or bankrupt. What's the definition of muflis? The definition is a person whose debts are due and the amount that he owes in debt is more than the money that he has in his hands, or more than his wealth. So if someone asks for their debt is due, and they're not being paid back, this person can go to the Islamic judge and ask them to prevent the person who owns them money from using their own money. So to place a restriction order on them, basically. Okay? Once this is done, the person is no longer allowed to use his own money. If they go and buy and sell, it doesn't work. Okay? Just like if someone was to stop a bank card today, it's similar to that. There will be a restriction order against them that they're not allowed to use them. Like when you freeze the person's money, it's similar to that. Now, like I said, it means this person is not able to start any new transaction with their own wealth. Okay? Why? The Islamic judge would come and sell the person's wealth, sell the parts of their property or whatever they own, and distribute the money between the people who have the debt. Okay? There's a lot of details to that in the longer books of fiqh, but generally, once this order is put upon someone, they're not allowed to to use their money anymore. Another type of restriction is restriction on a person who is close to death. What does this mean? So if someone is ill and unwell, and most likely this illness will lead to death. So they call it in Arabic maradul maut. Yeah, the illness that leads to death. This person Islamically is restricted in using their wealth to a certain extent. So they are allowed to use a third of their wealth. But anything beyond a third of their wealth, they're not allowed to use. They're restricted in using beyond a third of their wealth. So someone's on a deathbed and they decide to use all their money. Not allowed because the people after him, his inheritors, have a right in that money. And if a person decides to use that money, then we'll mention the ruling in the end of this class and how it depends on the permission of people who inherit him after he passes away. Okay. Another type of restriction that the author mentioned that is restriction on someone who is young in age, and we said that's a type of sefer. So if someone is too young in age, they haven't reached the age of puberty yet, they're not allowed to, and Islamically it doesn't count if they use their money. Their transaction doesn't count. And there's many other types. Okay. Also a slave. A slave doesn't own their own money. They're owned by someone else. So if they were to go and use their money, also they would be restricted in using their wealth. Okay. So what are the rulings if some of these people use their wealth? Okay, number one. If the person using the money is someone who is young, someone who hasn't reached the age of puberty yet, okay, or someone who is insane, they're not in their mind, okay, or someone who is spendthrift, who is Safi, the transaction is invalid, doesn't count. Okay, just like we mentioned in the first class, the same thing regarding these other types. Now, if the transaction, now this, of course, what we said now, that's generally regarding the transactions of money. Someone who is spendthrift, if their transaction isn't money, it's just debt, okay? So their transaction is in the future, okay? Then it would be valid with the conditions that I mentioned there. If someone is ill, someone is about to pass away, close to death, okay? Then, like I said, other than a third of their money is suspended, and it pends basically if the person wants to use their money, pends until after the person's death. After the death of the person, then the permission of the people who inherit him is required to for this transaction to go forward. Now, the last thing is the transactions of a slave, someone who is owned by another person. If a slave goes into any transactions, okay, it depends. The author here, he says that a transaction of a slave follow him, and the money can be taken from him after he's freed. What does he mean? Okay, let's say a slave enters a restaurant, okay, and he's hungry, and the owner of the restaurant knows that this person is a slave. He isn't owned by anyone, okay, and he sits down. He lets him sit down, and he says, "What do you want to eat?" He says, "Yalla, I want to eat, I want some biryani, some salad, some dal," okay, and he sits and eats. When he gets up to leave, the owner of the restaurant comes and he asks him to pay. The slave says, "I have no money. How am I going to pay? I don't own anything." You know that I'm a slave. What happens? Islamically, when the slave is free, okay, the owner of the restaurant can then go and ask him for money. But until then, he can't do anything. But if the slave enters the restaurant and doesn't show that he's a slave, the owner doesn't know, he pretends to be a normal person and eats, then it's different. Then we have to ask the owner of the slave, the master, for the money, or if he doesn't want to pay the money, to sell the slave and then pay from that money. These are the rulings regarding the person who is restricted going into a transaction or using or other people's wealth. Okay. After that, the author goes on to another section of fiqh, which is known as al-sulh. Okay. Basically, reconciliation, some type of mediation or reconciliation that happens. Wealth. The author says, فصل ويصح الصلح مع الإصرار في الأموال الثابتة في الذمة وما يفضي إليه، وهو نوعان: إبراء ومعاوضة. الإبراء اقتصارهم من حقه على بعضه ولا يجوز فعله على شرط والمعاوضة عدوله عن حقه إلى غيره ويجري عليه حكم البيع. Anyone agree?
Reconciliation is permissible when there is an admission concerning property and what has the potential to convert into property. Reconciliation is of two types. One, absolution, ibra. It is reducing the debt. It is not permissible to make absolution contingent upon a condition. Number two, compensation, muwa'ada. Muwa'wada.
معاوضة.
Muawada. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. It is accepting something else in place of what is owed. It is subject to the rulings concerning transactions.
Okay. So reconciliation, the definition of it is a contract that leads to the end of conflict. Okay. If there's conflict, this can be used to sort out conflict in Islam, in fiqh. Bismillah. There are two types, like I said. There's ibra and muawada. So the first type means that you give up a portion of your right to prevent the conflict. You have $1,000 that you need to be paid. You say, just give me 800 back and khalas, to spare yourself going into conflict. Okay. The second type is this is compensation or muawada, which means you give up a right for a different right. You get something on behalf of something else that you deserve, that you are able to have. Okay. Now, reconciliation can only be done with physical wealth, with money, or things that lead to money. What does that mean? So, if someone, committed adultery or raped someone, okay, they can't say, you know what, give up your right and I'll give you some money. Yeah, you can't bribe someone with money. You can't get away from your mistakes in life with money. Okay, but if someone killed another person, there's blood money that's involved. Okay, now in Islam, if someone kills another person, they may be killed also. That's the right of of the family, or they can give up their right and ask for money. Okay, so this leads to money. The end result is money. It's permissible Islamically to ask for money, and even if they ask for more than the blood money, for billions, yeah, this is sulh. This is reconciliation. If they want to give up their right, they can ask for whatever they want on behalf of them. Okay. So reconciliation, like I said, are two types. The first type, like I said, is ibra, which means that if you have $1,000 that that belong to you, that someone took from you, you can ask them to give you 600 on behalf of the 1,000. So you're just giving a part of what you had as charity. Okay. Second type is asking for something else. Okay. Now the second type is a form of buying and selling. I'm giving you my right in order for you to give me this other thing back. And the rulings of buying and selling apply to this. The rulings we mentioned in buying and selling all apply here. Okay, including khiyar, the choice of changing the opinion before the person leaves the gathering, and all the other details, they all apply here. So most of what we studied in the past sections of fiqh all apply to this. Generally, if you want to give up your right, you can give it up, and you can give it up on behalf of other things, as if you're selling your right, basically, to the other person. Okay. Now, the first type, which is ibra, giving up a part of what you own, the scholars say it must be, if you give up a part of what you own for sulh, you can't put that, you can't make it conditional. You can't say, I give up my right if this, because if you make it condition, then it doesn't add with the concept of Ibrahim. After that, the author rahimahullah ta'ala goes to another section, which it's actually the same section, but it's a different type of reconciliation. And the translator, Sheikh Musa, he names it. He says property issues, I guess. So there's some types of property issues that are related to different sides having rights. And the author mentioned three main rulings here. We'll read them quickly, inshallah. He says, ويجوز للإنسان أن يشرع روشنا في طريق نافذ بحيث لا يتضرر المار به ولا يجوز في الدرب المشترك إلا بإذن الشركاء ويجوز تقديم الباب في الدرب المشترك ولا يجوز تأخيره إلا بإذن الشركاء.
It is permissible for a person to begin construction of a balcony, Roshan, over a non-dead-end alley, provided it does not hamper traffic. It is not permissible to do so over a dead-end alley, except with permission from those who share its usage. It is permissible to move one's door closer to the beginning of a dead-end alley that is shared with others. It is not permissible to move it deeper into the alley without permission from the others who share the alley.
Okay. Some words that we have to understand in this section. Number one, Roshan. Roshan means balcony. Okay. He says you're allowed to build a balcony with certain conditions. That's the first thing. Second thing, Tariq Nafid. So the road that has access from both sides that has special rules. Number three, Ad-Darb means a road that has a dead end. Every one of these have different rulings. So basically, as you can see in the picture I've drawn here, the first type, Tariq al-Nafid, is a road that's open from both sides. And there's basically people who have houses on both sides. Okay? So people live, in the old days, people would live, and if you go to old cities, and even today, but generally in the older cities, the roads are small, and there's no gap between the person's house and the road. Okay? So Islamically, everyone has a right in the road. There's certain rulings regarding the road. So what are the rulings? Okay. Number one, if someone wants to build a balcony, something overseeing the road. Okay. What's the ruling? Generally, if the road is open from both sides, the only condition is that people don't get affected. It doesn't harm the people who will be crossing the road, who will be walking up and down the road. Okay. Someone using the road isn't affected. The balcony doesn't harm people. Khalas, you can build a balcony and you don't need permission to build a balcony. If it's a road that has a dead end, okay, it's more of a closed off road. It's more of a, I guess the road is considered to be like specific to the people who live there. Okay, then you need to ask permission from the people who also live on that road, which are known as ash-shuraka in fiqh. So basically, everyone who has a door that opens onto the road, okay, has access, immediate access to the road. These are the people you have to ask permission from. But if someone's door is from the other side, their house is built on the road, but the entrance of the house is from the other road, the other side, you don't need to ask their permission also. But the permission of the people whose houses, whose entrance of the houses open onto the road immediately, these are the people who you have to ask permission from. Okay. Another condition to do these things, to build a balcony on a road, is the person is a Muslim. This is for Muslims. As Muslims, they, of course, restricted with certain rulings. They know the consequences of looking into other people's property and awra, and they are more aware of that. Non-Muslims, I guess, are not forced to abide by the same rulings. They don't have the same, kind of, I guess, belief restricting them. So these rulings are regarding Muslims only. Okay. The last matter he mentioned is taqdeem al-bab. So changing one's door, changing the area that your door begins. So basically, if we have a road that has a dead end, okay, every person on the road has a percentage of the road. So from your door, that's that gives you access and ownership, basically, or the right to use that part of the road. So if you want to change the position of your door, if that means bringing your door back to the beginning of the road, if it means changing your door from the front of the road to the back, to the end of your house, closer to the opening of the road, then that's fine, because you are giving up part of your right to have access to more of the street. But if you want to take more or percentage of the street under your own access, you want to put your door closer to the end of the street, then you have to ask permission from the people in the street. Who do you have to ask permission from? The people who live closer to the end of the street than you. So in the picture we have here, you have house number 1, house number 2, house number 3. If number 1 wants to move their door from the beginning of the street to the end of their property, it's the end of the circle, the rectangle here, then they have to ask permission from number 2, number 3. If number 2 wants to move his door closer to the end of the street, he has to ask permission from number 3, not from number 1, because he doesn't affect the ownership and the rights of number 1, basically. These are some rulings that the scholars mention in fiqh. Allah Ta'ala a'lam. The last thing the author mentions here is الصلح. He says فصل ويصح ضمان الضمان يصح ضمان الديون المستقرة في الذمة إذا علم قدرها، ولصاحب الحق مطالبة من شاء من ضامن والمضمون عنه، وإذا كان الضمان على ما بيناه، وإذا غرم الضامن رجع على المضمون عنه إذا كان الضمان والقضاء بإذنه، ولا يصح ضمان المجهول ولا ما لا يجب إلا درك المبيع.
Guaranteeing payment. It is permissible to guarantee payment of debts that have the potential to become irrevocably established. If the amount is known, the person owed is entitled to seek payment from the guarantor and the one for whom he guarantees, if the debt is as we have clarified. If the guarantor pays, he seeks reimbursement from the one for whom he guaranteed, if the guarantee and payment was with his permission. It is not permissible to guarantee something that is not specified or not yet due, except guaranteeing that a sale item is legitimate.
Okay. So in Islam, in the Shafi'i madhab, and other madhab also, it is mustahab. It's recommended for a person to guarantee. What does that mean? So, someone else, someone foreign, telling a person to go ahead with the basically to not worry about the transaction that he has with you, because I will guarantee. If the person can't pay, I will pay. Okay, so guarantee the payment of a debt is something that is mustahab sunnah if a person can pay. If a person has $1 million sitting there and they want to guarantee the debt of a few $1,000s for someone, then they get the reward for that, inshallah ta'ala, because you are helping a person with their affairs. In the Quran, Allah Ta'ala says, وَلِمَنْ جَاءَ بِهِ حِمْلُ بَعِيرٍ وَأَبِيهِ زَعِيمٌ. The story of Yusuf alayhi salam, we find that the brothers of Yusuf were told that if you give, or if you find the cup or the bowl of the king of Egypt that is lost, then we'll give you a huge amount of food as a gift. If you can get what we want, we'll give it to you. Now, this ruling is the ruling of Yusuf alayhi salam in his time. In the Shafi'i madhab, we don't take rulings from the prophets before us, but it's an example of basically, the concept of helping and supporting others by, offering your service, basically. Now, there's a lot of rulings regarding guaranteeing that we'll go into the next class, inshallah. But generally, the concept is sunnah, something recommended. And if a person enters this contract willingly, then the person who is looking for their right and wants their right, their debt to be paid, he can go and ask either the original person or the person who guaranteed to give them the money back. Inshallah, we'll go into the rest of the details in the next class because the time is up. If there's any quick questions, we'll take them inshallah. If not, we'll end. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh.
Ameen wa iyyakum. Was the class clear? Or was it a bit too fast?
No, it was clear, alhamdulillah.
Inshallah, we'll see you all next week. Jazakum.